Hey guys, so my internet's working now, so we can continue with the demo. So what we just did was we added in these print statements right here to check if the information is being passed between the sign up view controller and the add user info view controller. So basically the user is entering a bunch of information in here, and we want to make sure that when the continue button is pressed and the user goes to the next view controller, which is the add user info view controller, then all of these values right here are no longer empty strings, and they're set to the right values that the user put in into the sign up view controller. So in order to test that, let's run the simulator, and we'll just say username is test, first name is test, last name is test2, password is test, and then test at test.com. And once we press continue, then in the console, you will see right here that the username is test and the email is test.com, test@test.com. So that means that the information that we entered in the sign up view controller is being passed into this add user info view controller, and we can use it as we wish. Cool. So now we can get rid of these print statements. And the next thing that we want to do is add support for all of this information that the user needs to enter in the add user info view controller. So this one right here. So in order to do that, first thing that we want to do is we want to, when the view is loaded, we want to make sure not both of these are are showing up in this color. So let's say that by default the mail button is checked. So what we can do is we can say that we can first create a variable called gender, so var gender, and by default we can set the gender to male. And not being sexist here, we just need to choose one. So so var gender equals male, and then over here in the view.load method, we can say that when the view loads, then the female button dot highlighted equals true. Cool. So next thing that we can do is we can create an IV action, so function. So once the male button is pressed, we can say male button pressed. Then we want to change gender to male, and we can do male button dot highlighted equals false, and female button dot highlighted equals true. And similarly, we can make a function for when the female button is pressed. We call this female button pressed. Make sure it's an action. And over here, if the female button is pressed, we'll set this gender variable equal to female, and the male button will now be highlighted, and the female button will be not highlighted. So let's see how this works. Let's run the simulator, and let's just type in whatever. And okay, so the male button is pressed right here, and then female and male and female and male. Okay, so it seems like that is working. Only one is showing at a time. And the next thing we want to add support for is the birthday. So for the birthday, let's create a variable called var birthday, and that can be a string that we set. So in order to set the birthday, that's a little more complicated. So the birthday won't just be the birthday text field, or actually, the birthday we can do it in a way that it is just the birthday text field's text. But the thing is, when the user is entering in the birthday, you don't want them to have to enter in all the slashes. So why don't we do that for them? Because that's what a good authentication system would do. So in order to do that, what we need to do is add in one function called textFieldDidChange. And the way we're going to add that in is first we are going to just go here, and I am just going to give you some code for that you can look into. And right here, I'm just going to paste this method. And basically what that's saying is that whenever the text field did change, so whenever you're editing this text field and its contents change, if the birthday text field's character count equals 2, so if only 2 characters have been entered, then we want to append a slash to it. So that means, let's say I've entered the first 2 characters, which is month, then it'll add a slash for me. And if the characters dot count is 5, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if the month date has been entered, the slash has been appended, and then the date or the day has been entered, then it'll add another slash, and then you can type year after. Okay, so let's give this a try. So let's say someone was born on 1st of January, and we'll see that that isn't working. And here's the reason why. We've added this method, but we really haven't added the text field delegate to this view controller. And it's necessary for us to add that so it can figure out that, hey, a text field is changing and I need to do something. So we're going to go to the top, and what we're going to do is we're going to add in UI text field delegate right here. And so the next thing that we want to do is we want to add something into our view-to-load method, and that is going to be right in here. And we are going to want to say that, so one more aspect we need to think about in this is that when the keyboard opens up for the birthday text field, then we don't want the user to have to navigate to the numbers. We just want the numbers to automatically be there. So what we want to do is we want to take the birthday text field, and we want to set the keyboard type to UI keyboard dot UI keyboard type dot phone pad. So that way only a keyboard showing only numbers will show up. So next thing we want to do is we want to make sure that this so we have this function right here, text field did change, but we haven't really connected it, right? Because whenever the text field is changing, there's no IB action function there. So one way we want to connect it so that whenever this is changed, this function is called, is we can just say birthday text field dot add target, and that's just another way of basically creating a connection between those two so that a function is called. And for the target will be self, and the action will be the name of the function that we want to be called when the birthday text field is edited, and that'll be text field did change. And we want to add a colon right after. That's just convention. And over here, we'll say UI control events dot editing change. And let's say this was a button. Instead, we would do UI control events dot touch up inside. So if it was a button and a button was pressed, then that would be the type of event. But in this case, we will just do editing changed, because we're just a text field is not really a button you pressed. It's just if you're changing the content of this, then this function will be called. So now everything should work, and we can see that in a simulator. And okay, so let's say 01, and we'll see that it's showing up now, and 03, and 1995. Cool. So all the slashes are being filled in now. Okay, so now we have support for this, and by doing birthday text field dot text, we can get whatever value is in here. So that's all good. Now, what's the last data that we want to deal with and get from the user? That is the profile picture. So for that, we are going to want to have a function for when someone clicks the choose profile picture button, and for that we need to create an action outlet right here. So an action, and we're going to say choose profile picture is the name of the function that'll be called when that button is pressed. And for this, I am going to give you some code, and that code will be this right here. And before we can get that code to work, one thing that we need to do is go to the top right here, and where we add in our delegates, we're going to add in UI navigation controller delegate and UI image picker controller delegate. And now in this code right here, what we want to do is, so this code will basically be called, so basically whenever this function is called right here, it'll open up an image picker controller, which is pretty typical on iPhones. It basically just opens up your photo gallery, and you can choose an image from that. So once that image is chosen, then we want to set this image view's image to that. So let's look at what we've called the image view. We've called it profpic image view. So profpic image view dot image, and we want to set that equal to whatever we're defined as the image that is returned here. So this image. So profpic image view dot image equals image, as defined right here. So then whenever the user selects something from the image picker controller that shows up, then it'll first dismiss the controller. So once that image is selected, that controller goes away, and we're back over here, and it'll set this profpic image view's image to the image that is selected. Cool. So now we have this function for getting a pop-up of all the images from the user's photo gallery, and then letting the user select the proper photo, and then setting this image view to that photo. But we need to call that first. We need to call this function right here, and in order to do that, in our function right here, the choose profile picture function, which is what's called when we click on this, we will add this code. So let image equal UI image picker controller, and we'll say image.delegate equals self, and image.sourceType equal UI image picker controller source type dot photo library. So that's making sure that photo library is where we're getting the image from, and image dot allows editing equals false, and self dot present view controller image animated true no. Cool. So given that this is your first time doing this, you may not be completely comfortable with the code here, but I'll give you a general idea of what it's doing. So first thing it's doing is it's making a UI image picker controller instantiation right here, and it's setting its delegate, and it's making sure that the source type that you're getting this from is the photo library. You could also do camera if you wanted to let the user take a picture and get their image that way. And then it's basically taking this UI image for controller where the photo library is, and the user can select what photo they want, and it's presenting that. And when it does that, then this function is called right after the user has selected their image. So this function, this code basically occurs when the user presses this choose profile picture button, and once a pop-up appears with all of their images and they select their image, then this code is executed right here. So now if we run our app in the simulator, and over here we say choose profile picture, then it asks a login demo would like to access your photos. You click OK, you can choose any photo, and then it shows up right here. Cool. So that's all working now. But let's say that I want to be a little fancy and I don't just like the picture showing up like that. So I want my picture to be rounded so that the profile picture shows up sort of rounded so it looks nice. So in order to do that, we can add in two simple lines of code. And before going there, let's discuss what we need to do after we've gathered all this data. So after we've gathered all this data, we want to be able to upload it to Parse. So take a minute and to yourself just think about how we want to do that and how we want to save that. Okay, so hopefully you had a minute to think about that. And that's the next thing we're gonna do right after we set this image view to be circular. And the way we want to set this image view to be circular is that right in this image picker controller, right after we set the image, we can just add two simple lines of code, and we can say that profpic image view dot layer dot corner radius equals profpic image view dot frame dot size dot width divided by 2, and then we can say profpic image view dot clip to bounds equals true. And I'm not going to really explain this code, but just remember that if you ever want to make this image circular, then that's the way to do it. And okay, so now that we have all this data gathered, what we want to do is when the user presses the sign up button, we want to store this data in Parse, and we want to take them to this view controller that you're taken to right when you log in, and say that, hey, to the user, you are logged in. So let's go to this view controller right here, and we'll say welcome, and we will also say, so we'll just say welcome right there, and we'll add some constraints, and we'll add a segue between these two view controllers. So it'll be show segue, and we can give that segue an identifier, and we'll call it to main VC from signup. Okay, so once the user clicks this sign up button, then this function right here is called, and once this so in this function right here, we basically want to write some parse code in order to create that new user object, and then after that we will perform this segue that we just created. So how do we go about this? So in the past tutorial, I went over how to create a PF user object, and that's going to be really useful here. So remember when we did let user equal PF user? So that's exactly what we want to do right now. So we basically created a parse user object, and now we want to set all of its fields to the values that we want. So this is actually really straightforward, and it's something that Parse makes really simple. So we can do user.username equals username that we have up here. So that's string right there. And then we can do user.password equals the password that we've defined up here. And then we can do user.email equals that email. And then let's say we want to set the user's first name. Then we have to do it this way. So user first name equals first name. And the reason for that is that this parse user object, by definition, has these inbuilt fields right here for username, password, and email, but it doesn't have these inbuilt fields for first name and last name. And if we go into our parse table, we can see that username, email, password, this is all given to us. But remember that we had to create ourselves this first name, last name, birthday, gender, and profile picture fields. So for that, we have to set it differently, just like this. So similarly, for last name, it will be user of last name equals last name, and user of gender equals gender. And now we want to save the profile picture we have over here as a PF file. So first we need to create a PF file out of that. So what we can do is we can say let prof pic file equal PF file, and we'll create that out of name and data. So the name, we can call it anything we want, and I'll just say profile picture.png, and this name is basically what it's going to show up as over here. So profile picture.png, and the data, we will do UI image JPEG representation, and we will say let's see, what was the name of our image view? It was profpic image view. So profpic image view.image is the image, and the compression quality will set to 0.5. And okay, cool. So just an explanation of this. Another thing that you can do is UI image PNG representation. But the reason we're doing JPEG representation is it allows us to put in a compression quality. So one of the bad things with Parse is on the free account, you can only store up to 10 MB in a PF file. So if we set the compression quality to 0.5, then it sort of gives us some extra leeway and says that, hey, whatever profile picture the user is uploading, we're sort of like compressing that by that ratio, and that will sort of give us further assurance that it will be under 10 MB and there won't be any errors. Cool. So now that we've done that, we can say the PF user object that we had of profile picture. So this is just the field from the Parse database right here, profile picture, is equal to prof pic file. Awesome. Okay, so now we've set all of these fields that we wanted, and next thing that we want to do is sign the user up. So the code for this is quite similar to the code that we had for the login, and it's basically just going to be user.signup in background with block, and we basically have to put that block in, and what that block is going to look like is this. So right in here, we're just going to take out these parentheses, and I'm copying and pasting some stuff in. So feel free to take some time to jot this down. And we want to add this in here. So this is basically our block. And right in here, we want to make sure that we can add a closing brace. And in here, we're going to do some stuff. So basically, this is the block that's called when we're signing up the user. So it basically tells us if it succeeded or if there's a sign up error. So if there's a sign up error, so sign up error, or if there's not a sign up error, then we want to do something. And if there is a sign up error, then we want to do something else. And so let's say there's a sign up error that maybe there's a bad internet connection or something. So once we try to send all this data to Parse, it didn't succeed. So in that case, we want to display an alert to the user, just like we did before. And in order to do that, we can say, just like last time, if let error equal sign up error dot user info. As ns string, then display error equals and say please try again later. And sorry, my bad. In this case, we know what the error is, right? So in that case, we want to say that display error equals the error that we're getting right here as string. And if not, so if this isn't giving us some error, like Parse isn't telling us what the error is, then we'll just set the display error equal to please try again later. What we'll notice is that so far we haven't added the code that we did for the previous ones, for the previous view controllers to display the alert. So let's go ahead and add that in right here. Let's just take that function that we wrote earlier and pop that in right there. And one thing we haven't done is declared what display error is. So var display error equals this, and now we just want to check for some basic pieces of information. And let's just check for birthday. Let's make sure that birthday, the birthday text field has some text in there. So we can say that if birthday text field dot text is the empty string, so there's no text in there, then we'll say display error equals please enter a birthday. So now we'll say that, and you can make this as customized as you want. You can make it as sophisticated as you want. I'm just showing you, some basic things that you want to do to make sure you have a decent sign-up system. So if this display error is not equal to nil, or sorry, not nil, to the empty string, then we want to display an alert with the display alert code we just had, and the title will be missing information, and the display error will be this display error that we've defined here. And if that's not the case, if all of the fields that we want have been filled out, then we will do the rest of this. So let's put that in that else statement right there. Okay, so right down here, as we were doing earlier, so if there's an error in signing up, then we also want to display an alert. So we'll do self.displayAlert, and we'll say could not sign up, and display error as defined here will be the error that we display in that case. But let's say everything goes well and the user is able to sign up, then what do we want to do? Once the user presses the sign up button, we want to take them to the main screen in our application. And in order to do that, does anyone know what it is? Take a minute and think to yourself. Right, so we want to perform a segue. So self.perform segue with identifier, and the segue we want to perform is this one, so let's look up its identifier, and that's the identifier we set. So let's copy and paste that in here, in quotes, and the sender will be self. So once the sign up happens, and it happens successfully, the user will be taken to this main screen right here. Cool, so let's try and see if this works. So let's say username is mobile devs, and first name is mobile, last name is devs. Password is, let's say, mdb, and email is mdb@mdb.com. And continue, and let's say gender is female, birthday is 01/03/1990. Let's select a profile picture, showing up right there, and let's press sign up. And we're taken to this next view controller, and let's see if this showed up in our data table. And what do you know, it has shown up. It says mobile devs, the email's right there, first name is right there, last name is there, gender is right there, and let's take a look at the profile picture. It is the correct profile picture. Cool, but what we'll see is missing is the birthday field right there, and that is with good cause because we have not defined that. So let's go back, and over here we'll say that birthday equals birthday text field dot text. And one more issue that we're seeing is that this was not showing up as well as it should. So let's go ahead and let's clear the constraints first. And let's go to image view, and we'll set this as aspect fill. And first off, we'll set its width and its height and add those two constraints. And then for these ones, we'll say add missing constraints, and we'll clear the constraints for this first. And we'll say add missing constraints, and for this, it should be good to go. So now, let's run this again in the simulator, and let's see. And now we'll just say mdb2, mdb2, password, mdb at mdb.com, and female, and 02, 09, 1880, whatever we want. Choose a profile picture, and it's showing up in a circular. It's showing up as circular right there, and let's click sign up. And it says the email address mdb@mdb.com has already been taken. Cool, that's a valid point. So it's a good thing it's showing us that. That's part of Parse's inbuilt support. And do you know how that error is coming up? It's coming up from this piece of code right here, because it's getting the sign up error that Parse is giving us, and that's why it's displaying this instead of saying just please try again later. Cool. So let's give it another try. And let's go into our backend. And MDB2 has all of the fields filled out. Cool. So that's all showing. Now, what are some other things that we need to test for? Let's just think about it. So we've gone over this whole tutorial and we figured out how to create a login and sign up system, but there's some more things that we need to add in to make sure that this login and sign up system is all nice and tidy, because there's a lot more checks that we need to add in. So one check is that we haven't done so far is that do the password and confirm password fields match? And checking that is pretty simple. All you need to do is check if their text values are equal, and if they're not, then just display an alert like we have been so far. And similarly, I'm sure that you can find some other things that you can customize about this user authentication system. But hopefully that got you going and got you, all the basics that you need to create a good sign up system. And see you guys next time. Thanks.